Hello again. We are now going to work through the final syllabus section that I'm going to record within Chapter 1. And we're going to be going through, well, you can see it on the board there, the regulatory and environment and corporate governance. Gosh, doesn't that sound dull? The regulatory environment and corporate governance of audit, goodness me. So in store for you now is, I guess, about 25 minutes, talking our way through through the regulatory environment and corporate governance. Very soft subject, and each of these very much expected to have a feel for these. This is not one of those ones where you're going to get a big question. You're just going to get something in passing, and you just need a feel for it. So let me give you a feel for each of these. Let me give you a feel for each of these headings. So I'm going to work my way through A3, and the first one in A3, as you can see, is A3A. Explain the development and status of international standards on auditing. Well, there you go. I told you that international standards on auditing came into existence in about 1980, and the really big change happened in 1990 when I started audit. And in 1990, the international standards on auditing changed completely the way that they looked at auditing and started doing this thing called risk-based auditing. Risk-based auditing is the idea that you look for risks and then you address your audit work there. It's a lovely idea, and it's going to be the basis of this whole course. But you need more than that, so I've got a slide here to help me to remind you what I want to show you. The audits are, I do apologise, the auditing standards, the international standards on auditing, the ISA, are written by these guys, the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, and there's about 20 of them. And yeah, they're mostly men. They're from all over the world, but the headquarters are in New York. And I was taking a look at the website this morning before I played some squash, and I noticed that the next meeting is taking place in Beijing, which sounds rather glamorous. Maybe they'll go and see the Terracotta Army once they've had their meeting. So they jet set all around the world, all 20 of them. Sounds expensive, doesn't it? And what they do is they set auditing standards, and they work in accordance with a work plan. So they develop standards using a work program. So if you just put in those 5 letters, I, A, S, B, into the internet, you will come to their website. You just click into their work program, and you will find what they're working on now. To be honest with you, auditing has settled down since 1990. It hasn't changed very much. There are subtle changes that are going on at the moment. There's a convergence between international auditing standards and US auditing standards, which is happening now, just at the moment. I'm recording this in 2011, and it's going to carry on for 2012 and 2013. Yeah, there is this convergence that's going on. But really, to be honest with you, it's not terribly exciting stuff that they're doing. They're just looking at the details of auditing, to be quite frank with you. But let's say that again. So how are auditing standards set? They're set by the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board using this work program. They have a website where you look at what they're working on, and you can correspond with the IAASB to give your opinions. You can even attend the meetings and so on. So standards are developed through a process of discussion. Now, do you remember what we were talking about in previous recordings in the context of the monitoring unit? The status of international standards on auditing is they have the effect of law. Because if you don't follow them, next time you go to work, you will be saying, "Would you like fries with that, sir?" The monitoring unit monitors registered auditors. Registered auditors are required to follow the ISA. If you do not follow the ISA, you're taken off the register and you cannot do audit. So next time you go to work, you'll be working at McDonald's and you'll be offering, would you like fries with that, sir? So ISA have the effect of law. Very simple. Okay, next. Explain the relationship between international standards on auditing and national standards. It's pretty simple, really. Here in the UK, and by and large across the world, we still have national standards on auditing, which is a bit odd, I think. But what we've done with our national standards is we've just copied the international standards. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Why don't we just say we follow the international standards? So in some countries, they just follow the international standards directly. In other countries, they copy the international standards. And that is true here in the UK and in the US, for example. They also copy the international standards rather than actually following them directly. But the relationship between international standards on auditing and national standards is that national standards are a copy of the international standards. Great. Discuss the objective, relevance and importance of corporate governance. I mean, look at that. I could be here all week, couldn't I? Corporate governance. Corporate governance. There are books about books that have been written on this subject, so I can't give you too much. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. Corporate governance, as its name suggests, is the business, philosophical, ethical subject of corporations and how they're governed. So corporate governance looks at corporations and their relationships with others. Corporate governance is also a philosophy. The philosophy is that corporations should be governed well for the benefit of everybody. They have a responsibility primarily to their shareholders. That is accepted, and their primary responsibility is financial. But good corporate governance accepts that there are other responsibilities, social and ethical in particular. Discuss the objective of corporate governance. The objective of corporate governance philosophers is to try and encourage companies to be more responsible. Relevance of corporate governance. The corporate governance does affect us as auditors, because we have to bear in mind that everything that companies do, including being involved in an audit, becomes political because of the nature of corporate governance, because of the nature of the way companies are run these days. So as auditors, we have to bear in mind that the companies are trying to communicate with shareholders, but the companies are also trying to communicate with a wider audience. So we need to be aware of that. There is one little extra thing. I wonder if I've got a slide for it just down here. It's really naff, because it's one very small part of corporate governance. But the biggest thing that affects us in the context of corporate governance is this word, Audit Committee. Now, the idea of an Audit Committee, I think I'll use a bit of colour, I'm getting a bit bored with black. The Audit Committee, which is made up of non-executive directors, is that the Audit Committee is an environment in which, I feel like some more colour, why not, I'm going to go crazy, in which three external bodies communicate with the Audit Committee. Those three external bodies are the directors, the EA and the IA. Ooh, EA, IA, what do these two abbreviations mean? Well, EA, you might have guessed, is the external auditor. In almost all of the questions in F8, you will be the external auditor. IA, by implication, therefore, is the internal auditor. You don't get much on the internal auditor in F8, but the internal auditor does exist, and the internal auditor is, of course, an auditor. The idea of the Audit Committee is it is an environment in which the directors, the EA and the IA, can communicate with one another. Some people think it's a great idea, some people think it's a lousy idea. I have mixed views on it, the idea of the Audit Committee. But what it definitely does do is it kind of creates a barrier between you as an external auditor and the directors, and it can be a bit irritating, frankly, when you want to just talk to the directors directly and just sort things out. It can be a bit irritating, frankly, when you're having to deal with an Audit Committee. But the upside is that the Audit Committee they're experienced old guys, and they can kind of stop a fight, really, is what it comes down to. So the idea, it's very simple, really. Like a lot of audit is very simple. It's simple, but I don't know if I agree with it, you see. The idea is simple. You have an audit committee to create a sensible environment where everyone can, reduce their emotion and anxiety and stress. You create an environment called the Audit Committee where everyone can talk to each other and they can be nice to each other and get things done. And that's the idea of the Audit Committee. Now, the Audit Committee, for some reason, has really taken off as an idea within corporate governance. So the people who, encourage corporate governance, the philosophers, the business people, the politicians who encourage good corporate governance, have come to the idea that an Audit Committee is a good thing to have. I'm not so sure it is such a great thing to have, but they think it's a good thing to have. So one of the biggest factors that affects us as auditors is, rather than talking to directors directly, and rather than doing our reappointment directly with the directors or directly with the shareholders, we have to deal with this body called the Audit Committee. So the Audit Committee is our channel for communication on any subjects. So our contract is signed by the Audit Committee. We discuss our planning with the Audit Committee. We discuss the results of our test with the Audit Committee. We discuss any problems we have with the Audit Committee, and then we give our reports to the Audit Committee before we actually stick it into the financial statement. So our channel for communication of anything significant is through the Audit Committee. And that's the idea of the Audit Committee, and it's the main thing that comes out of corporate governance. Next, discuss the need for auditors to communicate